In this review we are looking at a classic crane. This scale model is produced by IMC Models and it comes in an outer shipping carton. And at the end we see it's the Nederhoff Demag AC650.
Let's weigh it up.
The whole box goes onto the weighbridge and it's £12 5 ounces, which happens to be 5.57 kilograms. It is a nice quality shipping carton and inside we see the fully branded box. It is in the colours of Nederhoff and it also has nederhoffshop.com on it. There are line diagrams of the real crane, and if we go to the underneath we can see that it is made by IMC Models. Let's open the box and see what's inside. We find some expanded polystyrene trays, and they're nicely marked, including a lid for the manual, and there it is, and we'll look at that shortly. And the trays are also clipped together, so there's no cutting of tape to do. Inside the parts are very well packed. So here is the manual, and it starts with the layout of the box and also a full parts list. After that, it contains very comprehensive instructions. To produce a transport configuration, we firstly need to disassemble the SSL boom head connection, and that means undoing nuts and bolts with the tools provided. The tie bars on each side get carried on holders and locked in place with pins. A nice touch in the packaging is that all the pin bags are individually numbered. The connectors at the boom head get added and they pin into position. There's also a wind gauge support that we can add. At the back we can fold out the outriggers a little bit, and the outrigger pads can be slotted into holders, so they travel nicely with the crane. We'll put the smallest hook on, and to access the winch the whole side panel comes off, and then we can use the included key to take some rope off of the winch drum. Then we can just reeve on the hook, which is straightforward, and we've produced the basic transport configuration.
Let's weigh it up again.
Using a helicopter, we fly it up onto the weighbridge and it's £4 15 ounces, which is 2.24 kgs. As an option, we can go for a heavier transport configuration by adding on the front outriggers. Out of the box, the pistons get pushed into the ram jackets and a big pin locks the hinge point. You can try to fit the outrigger pads as before, but it's best not to because they stop the beam folding in properly. Next, we will also add on the SSL equipment, and we'll start by just getting it approximately in position. You can then make all the connections and do some reeving if you want, and then you can lower it to produce a transport configuration. Looking at photos, there seems to be different ways to store the SSL, and this is what the team have decided to do. Starting underneath, and the detail at the cab end is fairly simple, and the transmission and suspension components are modelled, although not all parts are fully joined. At the front the cab looks great and it's got a realistic number plate. There are nice lights and the mirror assemblies look good too, and the distinctive graphics are attractive, and that includes the AC650 below the door. Behind the cab we have the Nederhoff website, and there's some intricate highlighting of silver bolt heads. The wheels look nice enough, although there's no branding on the tyres. Towards the back, the outrigger beam is a detailed casting, and there are very sharp graphics on the crane body. All the grab rails are metal. There's some very nice detail at the back of the crane, including special signage, but one thing not so good on the review model was that the pistons of the outriggers couldn't be fully retracted. Up on top there are textured walkway surfaces, and the hoist rope is very good quality. The exhaust pipe has a proper hole, and there are also soft hydraulic hoses. On the side of the boom the Nederhoff graphics are excellent, and that also applies to the console inside the cab. It is extremely detailed and realistic. With the boom up we can see the detail on the carrier deck, and that includes some very good textured surfaces and a nice etched grille. There are also highlighted tank caps. Going close in on the outrigger beams, and there's some very nice graphics. The piston faces are smooth, and also included are spreader plates with proper lifting points. The boom sections are made really well with very thin walls, and the sideways superlift is an all-metal part. The hook block is also an all-metal part, and a Nederhoff load plate is included. As an alternative, you can also use the larger hook block, and it's a high-quality piece. Going back underneath, and there is suspension on all of the axles, and there's also steering on all axles except axle 6. Axle 6 is a lift axle which can be clipped up by tightening a screw, and it does have a significant ground clearance. Out on the Autoschnellweg, and the crane rolls along very nicely, and if you set the steering you can get a reasonable curve, although the steering on some of the axles might be slightly loose. So we've arrived on site, so let's pull out the outriggers. And they are slightly unusual because you can lock their position by folding out the struts. These get pinned in position, and we'll see that later. The outriggers are telescopic, and you wind down the pistons in the usual way. When you get the length you want, you slot them into the outrigger pads. And if you want, there's no problem having the whole crane wheels free. Next, we rotate out the cab from the transport position, and you firstly need to raise it slightly to be clear of the outrigger beam, and then bring it round and fully rotate it into position. And with a little bit of adjustment, you can get the right angle. The outrigger beams are certainly strong enough, but they're not quite horizontal when they're under load. The boom raises really easily because the hydraulic rams are free moving, as they have metal jackets, and you can lock them in the position you want using an Allen key on the tiny grub screws. With the boom up, we can now pin the struts that hold the outriggers at the correct position. You can pose the model self-ballasting, and the lifting chains are included, but on the review model they were not all properly the same length. With the ballast plate posed on the deck, we can then load up the counterweight blocks using the giant hand cranes. Attaching the ballast plate to the crane is simple enough. You hook it on the underside, and that lines up the holes at the top through which you feed a long steel pin. And that produces a nice robust connection. Rotating the crane was smooth and easy with no rocking, and extending the telescopic boom is also straightforward, and the various sections slide up easily. Each separate boom section can also be locked at 45%, 90% and 100% extensions. To play crane driver, we remove the magnetic panel from the side of the crane, and that allows us to operate the winch. And if you want, you can tilt the crane cab, but the range of movement is quite limited. Here we see the sideways superlift in service, and you can use it to tension up the boom very well for heavy lifting duties.
Time for a dim check.
Let's measure up with the boom fully extended, and it's about 51 inches or 130 centimetres. This is another high quality classic crane model from IMC Models. It has a number of differences from the AC700 model that was produced before, and it benefits from having a very high level of detail and also a high degree of functionality and flexibility. This is a limited edition which looks great in the livery of Nederhoff, and overall this model is excellent.